So many companies like play it so safe, but by playing it safe, I feel like they really just don't stand out.
Welcome back to another episode of Tank Talks. I'm your host, Matt Cohen. On this week's episode, we welcome Bill Macaitis, a seasoned marketing executive who has been instrumental in the explosive growth of some of the world's leading B2B SaaS companies. We delve into Bill's unique journey from his early days in the marketing world during the mid-1990s to his transition from the B2C media companies like IGN Entertainment into the B2B SaaS arena with Mark Benioff at Salesforce. We'll explore how Bill brought innovative B2C marketing strategies into a B2B environment during his time as a marketing leader at Slack and Zendesk during both their billion-dollar IPOs, alongside his approach to building and scaling high-performing marketing teams. We'll also discuss the future of marketing in the age of AI, common pitfalls for new marketing directors, and his insights on maintaining a work-life balance in high-pressure roles. Finally, we dig into Bill's newest project, SaaS CMO Pro, a platform aimed at democratizing marketing knowledge, and why he is so passionate about giving back to the startup community. But before we jump into this week's interview, we welcome back to the tank John Ruffolo to discuss the news and stories making headlines in the tech and venture capital ecosystem. All right, John, welcome back to the tank here. It's been a week since the federal election in the U.S. has obviously concluded. And not to pat myself on the back here, but I think I called the popular vote, and he definitely nailed that. And you also called that you didn't want to have a nail biter. You wanted to have a convincing victory, one side or the other. And we got that as well. But I wanted to kind of read off a couple statistics here that was, I think, what the mainstream media, as you mentioned online, MSM, got wrong, and how a lot of online journalism, like through Twitter and X and stuff, was nailing it right. So here's what we have in comparison on the stats from the 2024 U.S. federal election versus the 2020 election. So increased voter turnout among young adults. Voter participation among the 18 to 29 bracket rose by 8% from the 2020 election, which indicates obviously a heightened political engagement among the demographic. Much bigger shift in suburban voter preferences. So the suburban areas, which leaned mostly Democratic in 2020, showed a huge swing towards Republican candidates in a bunch of key influential states. We'll talk about those in a second. Now, on the higher supporter from non-white voters for Republicans, that was also where I think Trump made a lot of groundwork. We saw a huge increase around non-white voters like Black voters, doubling to 15%, as well as Latino voters supporting rise by 6% to 41% for Republicans. Early voting was also huge this year. Early voting reached unprecedented levels with over 100 million ballots cast before Election Day, surpassing the 2020 figures. And I can go through a bunch of others, but let me know what you saw out there that was also pretty stunning.
Well, those are great highlights. I just make a few additional comments. That the depth of the victory surprised me, and we had our predictions. Again, Matt, you called it. You were one of the only ones that called the popular vote. But you and I both vehemently agreed. We thought that this was a clear, was going to be a clear Trump victory, and we were both hoping for a clear landslide so that we don't have this issue about was there fraud in the election. I think it's been pretty clear. What has surprised me, though, is a couple of things. The pervasiveness of the swing of Trump almost universally across the United States. There were certainly some exceptions. I was watching CNN. They had some really good data coverage. And I just, when I saw Jake Tapper ask the question, so show me the counties in all the United States where Harris did better than Biden, and he's pushing the button and it shows up a blank screen. And even Jake said, you mean there's nothing? And that surprised me too, how pervasive. And the thing that I think, when people are being shocked, well, my reaction is, well, you weren't really paying attention. And, just because you and I were observing, it didn't mean that that's the result that we wanted. But that's the result based on the data. And we were both correlating the data that we were seeing on mainstream media versus other sources. And, the truth of the matter is I was getting confused. Why was there such a dichotomy? And you and I both spoke about this, and this is going to be the issue from a technology perspective. This is the moment when the mainstream media, we're going to look back and go, when did it fall apart? And this is the collapse. This is the demarcation point, and when they stopped focusing in on facts and data and replaced it with their personal opinions and try to foist their opinions and assuming that the voters in the United States are all stupid. And that's going to be the real problem. And now what you're going to see is the shift to social media becoming, the source of truth. The problem is going to be the source of truth. Is it going to be exasperating echo chambers now? Or will mainstream media give their head a shake and realize, oh my God, we got to go back to the days of decades ago when we're just not biased folks, but we're just trying to present the data. And that, to me, is what the real learning lesson around this has been.
I think that's also why things on Twitter, which has gotten crazy on its own right some places, but those community notes that you see that are like fact checking a lot of the stuff, they need to have that in mainstream media, because a lot of the stuff that's talked about on both sides on, Fox or MSNBC or somewhere, there's no fact checking happening. And these people are spewing their own personal views or whatever the teleprompter in front of them is saying. And we are now getting used to fact checking. I saw some of the best community notes I've ever seen before on Twitter this year. But sort of the other part, now that we've obviously made the clear, decisive victory towards Trump, is, what we're going to see happen next. And that, to me, obviously, the stock market reacted quite favorably off the news. There was a tweet I saw about how I think Elon donated or whatever, how much money to Trump's campaign. And with the moving Tesla stock yesterday or last week after this election, he paid it off 10x, another 10x banger for Elon.
So the number was 170 million that he donated, and the increase was a 15% increase in the market cap, which translates into what, 10 billion? I don't know. Make it up. 10 billion? That was the fastest return. I agree.
No, it was. Yeah, it was 10 billion. He owns it. Yeah. And then you've got like the whole healthcare situation. So the two biggest things I think that we could see is like the Twitter files, but in the deep state files, if they break up, open all the government files. But then with Robert Kennedy Jr. talking about his war that he's going to take on public health and the FDA, and how all the different vitamins and all the different hydrochloroquine and compounds are going to be uncovered. His two last things he said: I have two messages for you for the FDA. One, preserve your records, and two, pack your bags. I mean, what a time we are living in where politics is going to be uncovered. Let's switch gears, though, because we can talk about this forever. I don't know if you saw this interesting news here, but the buyer of chat.com, the domain name, was revealed. And obviously, it was pretty easy to figure out who it was. Did you follow the story with OpenAI?
No, I had not. Okay. No, I missed this.
So OpenAI had acquired the domain chat.com, which now redirects to ChatGPT. And obviously, this was known that there was a sale of the domain, but it wasn't revealed who the buyer was. So the actual domain that was previously purchased was purchased by the HubSpot founder, Dharmesh Shah. He confirmed on LinkedIn that he had sold it to OpenAI after buying it for more than $15 million, although he didn't specify a selling price. Shah said in a previous post that he sold it for more than I paid for it. And OpenAI obviously has a lot of money to buy this domain, so he paid $15 million. Now, he said he made money on the transaction, but he bought it and flipped it to Sam Altman. Interesting, huh?
Yeah, and I have to believe if you've done that, what's a conservative assumption on your profit? A 2x is a...
I guess, yeah.
Wow.
Pretty interesting story, actually, that came around from
that. God, that's good. Good for him.
Yeah. Keeping on the AI play here, Perplexity AI is now set to raise $500 million in new funding, valuing the artificial intelligence company at $9 billion, sources from the Wall Street Journal saying. This will triple Perplexity's valuation from its June funding round. Obviously, this is an incredible, speed in which these rounds are being done. You've got investors like Jeff Bezos and NVIDIA, obviously, and this company is expected to generate $50 million in revenue this year. So at a $9 billion valuation, $50 million, even if they double next year to $100 million, it's still a crazy markup, almost 100 times from forward earnings. What do you think about all these rapid succession rounds happening in a lot of these players still?
Well, that's almost 200 times, I guess. 50. I don't know if 50 million. Yeah, 200 times. But you might as well have 2,000 times. Yeah, I mean, all I can just say is that, it's just further evidence of the investment hype bubble in generative AI. It's going to end badly, not for everybody, but for most folks. And again, don't conflate that there's not value of generative AI. It's not what I'm saying. It's the investment bubble is such that if you're already paying $9 billion right now, they're not expecting a 3x multiple. They're expecting a minimum of a 10x return, if not greater on that. So basically what you have to expect is $100 billion plus exit. Is that possible? Sure it is. Historical evidence would suggest that, something like that, the amount of revenues that will be required is somewhere in the run rate of, pick your number, $10 billion a year to justify that.
I know. I mean, these are up in the top names though, right? So if you think about the top fastest growing early stage AI companies, it's Midjourney, expecting annual revenue of around 200 million, Perplexity with annual revenue of 50 million, and then DeepL, like deep learning, reported 30 million in revenue. So these companies are doubling very quickly. They're going from like 2 to 20, or that's a 10x, and then 20 to 40, 40 to 80, and they keep doubling and doubling. So I think investors are just excited to see that growth happening finally in these companies, and they're not actually growing a ton of headcount. So they're being very capital efficient too, because the revenues are growing so fast. So we're seeing it in some of our own companies as well. I've told people we have companies with less than 5 employees that are getting to $1 million in recurring revenue, growing 10% month over month. And they've only been in market for less than a year with their product.
But they tend to be at the app layer, right? Not at the infrastructure layer. That's the issue that I have. I'm not making reference to the application layer, but on when your gross margin starts off at 50% and you start running the math, at the end of the day, it is a discounted cash flow of that dictates your value, and losing 50% off the top on the infrastructure layer does require that you will have to, whatever your estimates were, double the top line so that you at least come at the same gross margin level in order to justify those valuations. That's why it makes it very, very difficult.
Yeah, I think, there was an interesting conversation that Elad Gil, very famous investor, early investors in Airbnb and Stripe, and his sort of vision for what he's seeing out there with a lot of the AI rounds that he's doing is they are writing checks into these AI companies like private equity deals. And they're basically telling them, don't worry about building organic growth in your business model. Go and acquire companies that are legacy service providers, managed service providers that service the market that you can service, strip down the cost structure of those companies that you've acquired, and use the AI to backfill the growth in margins and revenue expansion. So it's acquiring inorganic growth and then turning it into high margin SaaS-like business models, but starting off with a capital injection from a VC fund.
Yeah, and that's fine as long as the value of that business, and this is what you and I have said at the application layer, is your distribution. It's the clients that trust you. So let's use Salesforce as an example. If you're going to build an AI-focused CRM tool, but Salesforce has the channel, the real question is you may have the greatest tool set, but it doesn't matter because so much of the buyers just say, you know what, I've trusted Salesforce for the last 20 years. They'll catch up. They'll figure it out. They'll make some acquisitions and they'll retool. And that's the issue. It's competing against the good enough issue. And the question will be, who really wins out? And you're really describing the incumbent power is going to really win out in that? And that's an interesting, and that's a question. I don't know what the answer is, but those are the two big choices.
I think, it kind of goes back to the cloud day, like the cloud battle days of the lift and shift conversation, right? Like, is the cost worth it? Are the savings there? Is the time spent to shift over to a new platform there? And you're saying, well, if you're already on Salesforce and Salesforce is catching up, why am I going to bring in another application that I may actually not really benefit from? By the time I get fully ramped up, Salesforce may already be there.
I was around for the 20-year transition of the on-prem license maintenance. And some guys like Constellation Software still invest in it. That took 20 years. And we were talking about SaaS in the mid 1990s, and it just takes a long time. It doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. It just ends up taking longer than most people think. And as investors, you're deploying the capital now, and you're expecting an IRR in a reasonable time frame. That's the issue. It's really a time-based issue, not will it ever happen.
I think one of the best pieces of advice I got as a early stage B2B SaaS investor is that you can't make your company sell faster than their customers are willing to buy the software. Enterprise customers just don't buy fast for a reason. And therefore, no matter how hard you try to push as a startup to get your deals growing faster and bigger, you can't force the companies to buy from you any faster than they usually buy. And so you just have to build in accordance with that. You have to structure your resources and your runway and your team scaling.
Yeah, your cost structure.
Yeah, so very good thoughts. All right. Well, thanks for joining us in the tank today, John. Always a pleasure.
Great, thanks.
Now let's jump into the tank for this week's episode with Bill Macaitis. Thanks for joining us in the tank today, Bill.
Hey, no worries. Thanks for having me, Matt.
Bill, you have an incredible career in marketing and technology, but it didn't always start out that way. And maybe for some of our listeners who aren't familiar with your background, it'd be great if you can give us a little bit of a history on you and kind of where you grew up, what your childhood was like, and how you ended up in the marketing space in the mid-90s.
Yeah, sure. Mid-90s, man. Every time I hear that, I feel a little old. But yeah, I grew up in Chicago, so western suburbs. I always liked business. It was kind of weird. I just knew at a really early age that I loved it. I was the nerd in the back reading Fortune, Forbes, and Economist. I just love that stuff. I don't know why I did. And I did a startup right out of college. Unfortunately, I was not as wise then. I didn't know there were things called VCs that would give you money. So we had to bootstrap it. And trust me, we had zero money coming out of college. So that was an experience. I was in the gaming space. We did competitive rankings and tournaments. We grew to about 10 million members. We had an early SaaS subscription model. So we had a freemium tier, gold, platinum, diamond. Sold that, went to work on a little bit more on the B2C side. So went to work for more larger media publishing companies. So IGN Entertainment, if you're into gaming, you might know to do gaming reviews. We grew that network up really big. We had a roll-up strategy. So we acquired companies like GameSpy, Rotten Tomatoes, AskMen. And we were about to go public, and then News Corp came in the last second and bought us. And so then I kind of shifted to a more centralized marketing role where I ran marketing for really big properties like Fox Sports or Wall Street Journal or American Idol. Grew that as a really large network as well, I think third largest in the world, and then went over to the B2B side. And, it was really like, got a call from Salesforce, and Mark was, building this cloud thing, and he wanted some more B2C DNA. And I just thought it was an incredible opportunity. So, had the opportunity to work with Mark and help grow Salesforce, build their entire kind of inbound marketing engine. And then did a last couple of tours of duty with Zendesk as their CMO, kind of came in there, went through an IPO, and then Slack. Same thing, came in early, built it out, and then an eventual IPO and acquisition as well.
I love how you call it tours of duty, and you get a call from Mark Benioff to help you, to help with this company called Salesforce. But you weren't in the Bay Area, if I recall. Is that correct?
No, I kind of moved around. So I did, that startup we did right out of college. We were all remote, which was weird. Like 30 years ago, we did a fully remote startup, and we used like AIM and ICQ, and we had early microphones, but it worked, right?
Mom, get off the internet. It's hard to connect with my partners.
I mean, I remember when, modems, you would hear that do.
Yeah.
When it would dial up. I mean, that's embarrassing. But yes, spent some time in Denver, met my wife there. And then, we moved out, I want to say in the early 2000s to the Bay Area. And I did, that were sort of startups were all out here.
Right. So early transition from B2C media company to the B2B SaaS world must have been pretty interesting. What did you learn from your time at IGN Entertainment, obviously running with Rotten Tomatoes and stuff, that helped shape your approach to the B2B SaaS world?
It was interesting. Coming over to B2B, I think Salesforce was very modern from like a product perspective. This whole idea, right, that you could just go to a website and use software application and you have to install it on their servers. But what I found was like B2B, I don't know what it was. It just like the tactics they used were a little more dated, right? I think like on B2C, you are the marketing and sales engine, right? Everything is wrapped up in one, right? So you have to like use a little bit more modern tools. So that was kind of interesting. I think the other one was, there was much more attention put on brand in B2C. On building these brands, on measuring these brands, on infusing them into your product. In B2B, I didn't see that as much, right? I mean, to be honest, it felt like a lot of the companies in the B2B space were using a really dated playbook. It was just around press releases, events, top-down selling, cold calling. And I think that's why it was really fun for me at Salesforce is I was able to bring in a lot of these more modern ways to grow, more virality loops, freemium models, content marketing, SEO. There's just so many different ways, even like online advertising and all the targeting that I was really familiar with on the B2C side, working for a media company. Obviously, you sell a lot of ads, right? So you kind of understand the level of targeting that's capable. And even though that's a little bit more common now with ABM, back then it was very uncommon, right, for B2B companies to do more targeted advertising.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like it was a little bit of a transition, kind of, learning some of the B2B terminology, right? Like I remember I had a conversation with like our head developer and he was like, all right, well, this is a suspect. And I'm like, wait, what's a suspect? Like, what are you talking about, right? And, it's like, oh, it's before they become a prospect, and you learn all the acronyms, the SDRs and, the AEs. But, once you got that, it was a blast. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, because B2C is all about, you're right, it was content and marketing, but for them, it was just brand building as a B2C company. But for B2B, it was like, yeah, press release or nothing. We'll go back to building and just talking to our customers rather than speaking to everyone. But you joined Salesforce as an SVP of Marketing in 2008, which was interesting. Beginning of the global financial crisis, that really helped actually. Salesforce revenues grew from 900 million to 3 billion. And you helped establish Salesforce as one of the dominant brands in the cloud when cloud was pretty early. So what sort of strategies did you help kind of get the brand name of Salesforce associated with a new idea like the cloud?
A lot of my efforts focused on just building that, first of all, that inbound channel. Nothing wrong with doing outbound, cold calling in, and Salesforce was incredible at it. But, it's expensive, right? You have to hire a lot of outbound people to do those calls. You have to hire a lot of A's to close those deals. And so I think helping just build that inbound engine for them was really important. So building up the content, building up the SEO behind it, thinking about more targeted advertising, thinking about more, the free trial, the freemium, really modernizing the website, right? So moving from kind of a very static to more dynamic, thinking about conversion rate optimization, focusing a lot on the analytics side, just trying to build those like best in breed disciplines that were pretty common on the B2C side and building into B2B. And I will say this, I think Salesforce always had a good knack for the brand side. I think Mark was super savvy there. We had some great leaders as well, where Mark always knew how to kind of craft a narrative to stand out. And he was very bombastic. He loved talking to the press, right? He loved building those relationships up. But I think really for me, like I was always just like, hey, how do we amplify that further? How do we, make it a personal story? How do we have things like Sassy, who was kind of the mascot? How do we lean into this end of software type of thing with the Ghostbusters symbol? So I think just in general, like a lot of the stuff I learned in B2C, it was great to be able to bring that to the B2B side.
Were there any consumer brands that you were in love with that you tried to emulate at Salesforce or took inspiration from?
For me, just a lot of the brands that I'd worked with, right? So whether that was IGN or GameSpot or Rotten Tomatoes, these were just kind of brands that, had a personality, had a unique visual identity, had a specific editorial tone and voice. And not only that, like we would measure it, right? Like B2C side, I'm always kind of shocked on B2B because I work now with a lot of different startups and AI startups as they're trying to grow and scale. And I'll serve like as a board advisor. And I'll usually ask like, hey, what metrics are you tracking? A lot of them will track the funnel metrics, all the pipeline and leads and that, but very few will track any type of brand metrics. Like, aided recall or unaided recall, share voice, sentiment, share conversation. So for me, it was just kind of interesting, like bringing in those metrics and being able to track that and just taking inspiration from all these hosts of B2C companies. And that's the thing, like B2B is just, so many companies like play it so safe, but by playing it safe, I feel like they really just don't stand out. Playing it safe really just means you sound like everyone else, you look like everyone else, the product looks and sounds like everyone else. It's all very sterile, white background, black text. And it's hard in these spaces. And I think, having a little bit of the VC side, wherever someone has success, you're going to have 5 or 10 competitors, right? And even AI, no matter where you are now, you're going to have like 5, 10 different competitors. So you really need to think about how you can stand out and be noticed. And I think that was something that I tried to pull in, but I will say like Mark was really good at that. He had a natural knack of, understanding the importance of brand and the long-term effects it has on building and scaling a company.
Yeah, Bill, I actually was thinking about this when you said mascots. I didn't actually really understand the idea of mascots when it came to B2B SaaS companies. We've got like the Android mascot, you've got Sassy. These are like sports teams already, but we don't have mascots in all companies. Where did the idea for mascots for B2B SaaS companies even come about?
For me, I love mascots. I did. So after I did that long tour of duty, what I'm doing now is I have SaaS CMO Pro. And one of the first things I did when I built it up, so basically it's just a website and has all the videos where I talk about like, demand generation and inbound and product-led growth. And if you like that stuff, you can all check them out at SaaS CMO Pro. But one of the first things I did was I need a mascot for this, right? And I chose Sloth as a mascot because I just think sloths are awesome. They're super cute. And, and I went through and I worked with Fiverr and I made all these designs and I finally found one that I liked. But, for me, like what a mascot does is it really softens the brand. The emotions that people have when they see your mascot or really any of your ads, those transfer on to your company. So if you see like a cute sloth and you smile, you're like, oh, that's cute. And it transfers on to SaaS CMO Pro. It transfers on to your brand there. And I think for a lot of B2B companies, they're so impersonal and it feels like sometimes like a very adversarial relationship. And it's just a way to like help soften the brand, right? So I'm actually surprised more B2B companies don't take advantage of that.
I was going to say, how come so many don't have them? Like, I guess like you wouldn't consider like Meta or Amazon or Apple to be like B2B companies, but they have B2B tools. Like, I don't think they have mascots.
No, a lot don't. I think, a recurrent theme I've noticed is, I hate to say, but I feel like a lot of B2B companies and the people who work are very risk averse. It's like the old IBM thing, right? They're afraid of getting fired. They don't want to bring in something that could like backfire. And I remember I constantly had this debate and argument was like, no matter what stage you're in, no matter what stage company I was with, I was like, oh, I don't know if we can do that. I don't know if we can have a fun tone and voice. I don't know if we can have like a mascot. I don't know if we can do an ad like that, right? Like we sell to B2B and we sell to enterprises. You can't do that. It's never been done before. And every time I would do it, it would work and the numbers would go up and to the right, even, at a faster slope. So, it's just different, right? And a lot for go-to-market I found is go-to-market's always changing and evolving and there's different strategies. And I think because B2B was just for so long, it was like this outbound, top-down selling PR events model, like anything that's outside of that norm, you still have a lot of companies or leaders that are maybe a little bit hesitant towards it.
I want to just ask 2 more tour duty questions for you. So you did the Zendesk CMO role for 2 years. You led Zendesk $1.7 billion IPO, grew revenues over 360%. One question, did you create the logo for Zendesk? Because it's awesome.
I did not. So the Zendesk, I would love to say I created that one. But no, it's gone through several iterations, right? So what it is now to what it started off as, we had the Buddha, was love your help desk. People love that. And I can't tell you how many people came in and said, oh my God, I love that. I love Buddha. And, eventually, it was after me, but Zendesk kind of moved away from it. And there were some, religious appropriation things. And, it's a little bit tricky. But I would say just, at its heart, though, it really softened things out. And something like love your help desk, that was very different from most help desk software that you needed like a 200-page manual to learn how to use, right? It was a very different, it softened the brand. And and I think that was a big, big part of Zendesk's success.
Okay. What was the IPO process like for you?
The IPO process is, I think for anyone going through it, it's a little bit crazy. You learn a lot. Everybody has like, crazy expectations and they're checking and for good reason, right? It's like people are paying off college debts and they're trying to buy their first house and So there's a lot of that kind of crazy just energy going around. The tactical things I learned is like, hey, in marketing, you need a whole bunch of good customer references, right? You're going to do an investor deck, a tour, talk to a lot of people. They want to talk to customers. So that was something I learned. Now, luckily, we were kind of doing a big initiative anyway to get a lot of these like really great customer references, but we absolutely needed that. There's a lot of momentum that comes from it, a lot of awareness. You have to make tactical decisions, right? Like, do you list on the NYSE or do you list on NASDAQ? And each of them give you different type of branding, promotional type impressions and campaigns with it. So it's a super fun experience, and obviously like, for us, like being in NYSE and ringing the bell and being there, that was an amazing experience. But there's so many different options now.
What's a budget like for an IPO process? What's a budget that like needs to be allocated to even have a successful IPO, you think, from a marketing perspective?
I think a lot of it you're going to get on more earned media as well. So you're just going to have a lot more people covering you, right? So I wouldn't say like, you need a massive marketing budget for it. And that's always been kind of my philosophy with marketing too, right? Is that yes, you can have these big 6, 7, 8-figure budgets, but again, like I kind of worked off the premise of I have no money. I graduated from college. We have nothing. Like, what are all like these organic virality loop type, marketing things that we can leverage? But no, through the IPO process, you have a little bit. Like you'll have to. Obviously, you're going out to New York. There's expenses there. There's a lot more like PR, comms. But the other thing too is you'll have quiet periods. So what some people don't realize too is like leading up to it, you can't do any marketing campaign that is outside of what you would normally be doing. So sometimes when I advise companies now, I was working with Klaviyo before they did their IPO. And one of the things I told them, I was like, hey, if you want to do advertising around when you go IPO, you have to start doing it now, right? You have to have it was like normal. You can't just do a big marketing campaign right during the IPO. That's actually forbidden. So there's a lot of like little rules and regulations that you kind of have to be aware of.
So do you think if we start seeing more marketing by Stripe or like SpaceX, that means they're getting ready to go public because they can't do it beforehand?
Maybe, it might be like a year out.
Okay.
I mean, I think as you're aware, like the IPO markets have been pretty quiet. So maybe we'll start to see that unlocked. I know the soft landing looks pretty good, but that might be a good leading indicator.
Now with Slack, were you were the CMO, a CRO, and a board advisor for 3 years at Slack, and were you a part of the $16 billion IPO, or you joined after?
No, I came before that, actually. So I joined both Zendesk and Slack. I came in very early. So I was for both of them, I came in around 50 employees. For Slack, I helped build out that entire marketing team. And then pretty soon, just in conversations with Stuart, it was like, hey, I think it makes sense to also lead the sales team, the success team, the support team. So really more of a CRO type role. And I helped build those out as well. So it was, Slack was an amazing experience. I've always been come from a very trying to have a more modern playbook, but also a very customer-centric playbook. And Stuart was fantastic with that. He really, we both looked at the world the same way as like walking in someone else's shoes and trying to give them delightful experiences. And we just aligned really well there. And it was a crazy ride, but a super fun one.
I mean, I got to ask this because we all use this stories in early stage venture around product-led growth and high velocity and stuff like that. But was there a theory at Slack where there was this inflection point that they knew once somebody had reached 5 users or a certain amount of messages sent in Slack, they were a perfect target to convert from product-led growth to a paid user? Like, when did that calculation get figured out internally? Do you remember that?
I think both Stuart and myself, we love the brand, we love, the user experience, but we're also very data-driven, right? So, the early days Slack, we were tracking cohorts every single month, right? As they would go through, we would look at the propensity, how quickly did they become active? How quickly did they move to conversion paid? Freemium for Slack was the first time they did it. For me, that was like the 19th time, right? I did a freemium plan at every single company I've been with, literally every single one, right? I would say Salesforce is a little bit more of a free trial, but I'm very familiar with freemium type plans. And so by the time we did Slack, we used a lot more, I would argue, advanced freemium tactics and strategies. So we did a lot of thresholds. So a lot of times when people dive into freemium, they'll just go, the free plan, I almost call it crippleware. It's like you have access to 3 features, maybe for a week, whatever it is, and it's really hard to use. And you don't get much value out of it. Like, I love leveraging more thresholds. And not only that, but like very delayed thresholds. So Slack, we had a 10,000 message limit. And that would only hit in at about 6 months in, right? So you got a lot of value before you get your first, kind of big drive to upgrade. And once you had 10,000 messages, we're like, hey, you can still use it, but we're just going to only keep 10,000. So the oldest messages and files are going to start getting deleted off. And we got crazy good conversion rates from that. And I think a big thesis, and if any of you listening want to nerd out on PLG and freemium, I've literally done about 30 videos just on that topic. So go to SaaSCMOPro.com. You can check it out. My big theory was always like value before purchase decision. And so you can kind of see like when you have a 6 month of value and then you get a purchase decision versus, a 7-day free trial where maybe you've used the product once or twice versus even no free trial. And you literally have to make that call right off the beginning. Why you get really low conversion rates, right? Industry average is like 1% to 5%, right? And it's hard, right? I think we tried a lot of different advanced ones. We used also a lot of enterprise requirements as our upgrade drivers. So from a functionality perspective, Slack, whether you're enterprise plan, free plan, it looked the same as a user, right? You could do emoji reactions, you could do all these cool things. But to get to the enterprise plan, that's when you got things like an SLA, 99.9%. You got a customer success manager. You got, automatic provisioning, deprovisioning. You got SSO. You got IT admin controls, like all the things you kind of needed as an enterprise. And it was a very different model, right? We were really kind of pushing the limits of what go-to-market looked like and how do you leverage pricing and packaging as a part of it.
It's incredible, like the insights that you got from that. But we're starting to see the same thing happen now with a lot of these AI applications, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of free applications out there people can test and try. I'm sure the churn rates are super high. What mistakes are you seeing a lot of young founders do with their AI applications and trying to get people to put their credit cards down early? And what sort of advice would you give them on how to kind of leverage product-led growth with high velocity of usage without trying to push that freemium too early on in the process?
I've worked with several AI companies and I talk with a lot of them. I'd say a couple like common mistakes I'll see is one, they only offer the crippleware version. If there is a version, it's very limited, right? And I think that just gives a bad experience. That's one. Two, they don't build any type of brand, right? So a big thing in like B2B software as well, especially with these AI startups, is you'll go to the website and the website will look amazing, right? Like tons of emotion and color and visuals. But then when you get dropped in the product, it's like you're in a hospital, right? It's just white background, black text, all prompts, right? You could tell like that entire product was written by back-end developers, right? It probably was. So I'm always like, hey, infuse some personality there, like the onboarding process, have like a marketer write that or have someone that really has a unique tone and voice that understands it. Add some personality in. Talk about just reducing friction, right? A lot of AI founders too, they will know their product inside and out, but the new user doesn't, right? That's the first time they're using it. So anywhere you can reduce friction, that's a big PLG, driver as well. Get value before. And for the AI, like, especially on the pricing side, I do like more freemium models that have thresholds, right? So again, as opposed to just, either not letting them on the latest model, let them on, whatever the latest LM is, whatever version, 4.0, 4.5, whatever, but limit it to X amount of, prompts per month, something like that, right? So that way you're still getting people that come in, you're reducing barriers, you're reducing friction, but you're allowing them also to get value before they have to make that purchase decision. And again, like, a lot of these AI companies and LMs, whether you're Anthropic, OpenAI, they're also starting to sell into enterprises now. That's a huge part of the revenue base, right? So you want to have these natural seed and grow type models to where you can get these small pockets of usage in an enterprise. Like those type of deals are so much easier to close than to go in when no one's using you at all and you have to do a wall-to-wall, top-down deal. Like those just take multiple years to accomplish. So if you can price and package in a way that allows for a seed and grow model, I think you're going to have a much easier time for your long-term growth.
Now, like for sure, we've seen this in our portfolio. We have a company, VoiceFlow, who's been very early on in this AI agent building space, and they have a freemium model as well as an enterprise version. What would you say to founders out there who are struggling to know where to start first to find either product solution fit or eventually product market fit when they don't know if they want to dilute their brand by distracting it with a freemium model or like a consumer-based model or like a kind of SMB model versus focusing on those larger enterprise use cases, as you mentioned, but they also take a lot of time. Which one would you say to tackle first?
I would say one consistent theme, I'll have people that come to me that want my help. And a lot of times it's an AI startup that went straight to the enterprise to sell. And although they're getting some good traction there, they're like, Bill, no one knows about us. Every time we talk to someone, they've never heard about us before. And so my particular point of view on this is I actually think it's good to start with an SMB type product that's free because it forces you, one, to make your product simple and easy to use, right? You kind of have to do. Unit economics don't work when you have to throw in a customer success manager for every single person, right? If you start with SMB, you're forced to make it simple, fun, easy to use. And then the other thing is, I would respectfully disagree with the dilution of the brand, because what I found what happens is when you do a freemium model, all those free users are essentially a marketing team, right? Now, is there a cost to those free users? Yes. There's bandwidth costs, there's computational costs, there's support costs. But the alternative is, okay, hey, Bill, go out and buy me 1 million users, right? Okay, all right. I got to run a lot of events, got to run a lot of press releases, I got to do a lot of ads, I got to do a lot of this. I can do it. It's going to cost a lot, right? But if you have a freemium model, what you end up having is you get a ton of like these free marketers that are building that brand, that are talking about that brand, that are spreading it, that are taking it into larger enterprises, right? So I like starting with the SMB and then moving up market. If you do go straight to up market, it's not saying you can't overcome those challenges, but what I found is you tend to build features that only, to get that deal, you had to have that enterprise build it. So it ends up being a harder to use program. And again, you always run into brand awareness type issues. So like this all ties together. Like, it's the biggest advice I give to AI founders I work with is just really think long and hard about the go-to-market model you're using, whether you're using PLG, freemium, upmarket, enterprise, how you're marketing it, how you're selling it. Are you doing inbound sales, outbound sales, inbound marketing, or doing virality loops? Because those have massive impacts on your long-term growth. And not only that, but the capital efficiency of that growth, which is, at the end of the day, what Wall Street, and if we want to have more IPOs, we got to get like more efficient growth, right? We can't have this 2.5 years it costs 2.5 times to, bring in a new user than it does to the actual cost for it, right? It's just the capital efficiency ratios right now are just, out of whack.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I also tell our founders like that SMB market that you're letting use your product for free, even though they may not grow into the massive ACVs you want, they're a great test bed to break your product down, tell you what's wrong with it, and then look at those cohorts as a way to sell into the enterprise. Because enterprises are not just one buyer. It's a multitude of stakeholders, and assume that all of your SMB people are together one enterprise that all have different characteristics and needs, and you now know how to navigate a very complicated enterprise transaction because you've had to answer all those customer support tasks from all those SMB customers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. I mean, average enterprise deal, you're going through 6 or 7 different buyer personas. You're going through IT and procurement and legal and InfoSec and executives and, whoever's leading up the initiative. I mean, there's just so many, but doing that SMB motion for me, and we did this at Salesforce. We started with SMB and went up market. We did with Zendesk, started with SMB, went up market. We did with Slack, started with SMB up market. I think it just gives you a much different DNA and it allows you to grow and scale. The other thing, and this is just more like VC talk, but you want to have some barriers, right? The ones that go straight to the enterprise, what you do is you leave open the SMB for someone else to come in, whatever the next gen company is, right? And they almost always start there. So when you abandon that market, you're just letting an easy wedge for someone to get in. And everyone, they started SMB, I mean, outside of like maybe, Quicken or Intuit, most companies start SMB, they slowly move up market, right? So you get pushed higher and higher up until eventually you get pushed out. So it's a strategy I've used, but I've had a lot of success with it.
I think people also are a little scared of the churn numbers that they're going to have to show, but I don't think that's really realistic in the end of the day. You're supposed to have churn because they're bad customer profiles for you. They're not your ICP, but you had to get them out of the way to realize that in the beginning. I want to ask you a question, Bill. ABM, account-based marketing, it's something that a lot of companies are scared of to take on because it's something they've never done before. But when they get into it, they realize it's incredibly valuable. But you have to have the right infrastructure to support an ABM strategy. So maybe tell us a little bit about your experience in it. When's the right time for a team to think about implementing it? And what's the best chances of scaling it?
So I've always loved ABM. I think in the consumer side, again, you get really good with doing targeted advertising, right? And the more targeted your advertising, the more your persona, your ICP, the more your campaigns work out better, right? So ABM at a high level, all you're saying is you're just like, hey, we got a very targeted list of accounts that we want to go after. And an ideal ABM, it's marketing and sales working together to go after those accounts, right? There's a lot of different things that come into that. There is a targeted ad component. You could do like when they land on your homepage, they see it dynamically changed, suited to that company. The ads can be dynamically changed to a company or even an individual. There's content that you create that's specific to that company. And again, marketing and sales are working on this together. The one thing I learned with B2B too is these are long deal cycles. I've dived a lot into the nerdy side of, multi-touch attribution modeling. And what you find is that, like, for these long enterprise deals, you're going to have 30, 60, 100, 200 interactions, 200 touches, right, across all these different marketing and sales type channels. And so you have to view it as a journey, and you have to think about how you're educating them, nurturing them. And ABM, at the end of the day, there's a lot of different tech you can use for it. But really all it's doing is it's just allowing you to focus against a set of companies, right? You may have a top 50 list. Here are the 50 companies we want to go after. An ABM campaign just says, hey, we're not going to waste ads, content with anyone else. We're just going to focus here. Now, a really good trick I learned on how to, show the efficacy of these ABM programs is do all that, but you got that top 50 list, only do it to 25. The other 25 are your control group, right? And then you measure, deal velocity. How long did these take? ASP, how large were these deals? How quickly did they close? How quickly did they expand? By the way, you can do ABM towards existing customers as well. Half of SaaS AI revenue is add-on upgrade expansion, right? So there's no reason why you can't continue that. And same thing, don't do it to everyone, just do it to a select target group, have a control group that doesn't get it, and then measure the differences, right? Like there, you'll get really quick quantitative proof on how well it's working, and then you can kind of snowball it, right? You can invest more resources towards it.
That's smart. You do A/B testing of ABM strategies within the existing customer cohorts you have instead of going out to a new pipeline. And then you can also kind of expand that as you start to see the proof points come through. Do you think there's a lot of AI that can help on ABM strategy implementation now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would be hard for me to say hey, there's a tool that I've not seen AI come in for, right? And what I think is interesting is how many companies are just using the big general LLMs, right? They're using the Geminis or the OpenAIs or the Anthropics to do a lot of this, and how many are using point of sale tools. Just like SaaS, you're seeing a lot of very specialized tools that will help with very specific parts of that ABM process, where that's the ad buying, where that's the content creation, where that's the optimization, whether that's the coordination with sales from messaging perspective, project perspective, and you're seeing some pure AI companies come out that can do this, parts of it. And you're also seeing all the existing players that are kind of, bolting on the AI and the AI agents that are going to help it out. But yeah, I think for those worried about hey, this sounds really hard to do, I would just say AI is going to make it easier. And especially the AI agents, Salesforce did their big announcement there. That's going to be a big thing. These agents that can actually do the work now, not just answer questions. We're still, a little while off before we're going to see it more mainstream, but absolutely. I don't see anywhere in any field of marketing that is not going to be, completely disrupted by AI coming out, to be honest with you.
I took a look at Agentforce. A friend of mine works at Salesforce still, and I saw what it's doing when connecting everything from the data cloud to Marketo, to everything that Salesforce has in its umbrella. It's going to be very powerful. I want to switch gears for a second, talk about the career side for marketing professionals. You have a ton of experience, obviously seen a lot of mistakes from other marketing professionals. What are you thinking about now that marketing people, marketing directors should be aware of when they start to take on some of these newer tasks, including some of these new AI tools that they're incorporating to avoid some of those bigger mistakes that most often happens at marketing directors who are leveling up?
One, realize this is a titanic shift in how marketing has been done. Maybe not titanic in that it's going down, but it's just a huge, huge change, right? And in a weird way, for both young marketers or really any marketer, this is an opportunity just to immerse yourself in it and really stand out. It doesn't matter if you have 30 years or 50 years or 20 years of experience. This is such a new technology that it's just more about, hey, do you know how to leverage it? Do you know 5 or 10 different marketing AI tools? Do you know best practice on how to use it? Do you know how to write prompts? Do you know all the different LLMs and the advantages of each one, right? I think it's an awesome opportunity, and I get it's scary, and it's and I get there's probably still a little I don't know, maybe this isn't going to work out, and I don't have to, waste my time learning it. And I get we all have full-time jobs, and it's well, when am I supposed to do all this, right? But it's just one of those big shifts that's coming, right? It's when cloud came out or when mobile came out, you can just see it, right? And you see it at the forefront, right? At the VC side, the funding and, the valuation difference between AI and regular. And so I would just say as marketers, practitioners, don't be afraid to embrace it, really test it out, try it for your specific function, and just try to learn as much as you can.
I agree. I think anyone who's trying to avoid it or bury their head in the sand is going to get buried themselves because it's already happening. The scale at which you can accomplish a lot of tasks more efficiently and the way in which you can analyze data back from some of your outputs to decide on your next inputs for your next campaign or something are just way more accurate and more efficient than what you used to do before. But let's switch gears for a sec here. You've obviously launched SaaS CMO Pro, which is a way that helps basically democratize marketing knowledge, which is what we've been talking about here. What inspired you to start this project, and what are users getting out of the content you're creating?
Yeah, I think tactically I kept getting the same questions from founders again and again. And I'm like, I spent some time during the pandemic. I wanted to build out like just a better setup because I was like in the kitchen on my laptop, like a lot of people, right? I had a bright window behind me. No one could see me. And I'm like, come on, Bill, this isn't a good experience, right? So I built out just a little bit of a nicer camera and a little nicer setup. And then it was like, I just started seeing the same exact questions every time. Like, Bill, what about freemium? Or how do we do PLG? Or how do you build a brand? And I was just like, it'd be nice just to record these, right? So anybody could access it. So any AI founder or startup person could learn about marketing. So I try to, use more easy to understand terms, just walk people through all these different concepts, right? Like how to price and package, how to build brands, how to build a marketing team, how to price, when you think about AI, freemium, product-led growth, virality loops. So yeah, if you're interested, you can go to SaaSCMOPro.com. Everything's free. All the videos are free. They range from anywhere from 5 minutes to 60 minutes. I just dropped a video today, which is the one industry that PLG does not work for. 100% it does not work for. So if you're interested.
Don't tell us. Don't ruin the surprise. We got to get people to check it out.
We'll leave it there. But for me, it's been fun. And I think like in a lot of ways, like I'm really fortunate. I've reached a point where I kind of want to give back and just kind of share this knowledge with everyone. So I think there's a fun kind of democratization element of it as well.
Now, Bill, I'm curious, why did you choose video as the primary medium for your platform? And how are you seeing the video content space changing around marketing and education and the engagement?
For me, video is, and I'm sure you guys do the same on the VC side, right? You try to identify these macro trends that are happening. And obviously, we have AI is a big movement. In the past, we had, cloud, we had mobile, but the shift to video is really pronounced, right? So if you look at any type of analytics or market share for any of the social networks, you see, the percentage of people that are just going there purely and watching video and really watching video on their phones is the one that's growing exponentially, right? So whether that's TikTok, YouTube, X, even LinkedIn is really leaning into video now. I don't know if you've watched it on your feeds, but you're starting to see the mobile video come up, right? So for me, like, I built out the camera for these meetings. I'm like, well, I might as well use it, right? And record some videos. And B, it was like, you start to see that's just where people are, right? Like I always see this in consumer. And it's one of the things I would always tell the B2B companies is like, go where people are. Don't try to like reinvent the wheel. People spend their time now on their phones, on mobile, on video, create content for them that's helpful. And that's a great way to engage with the companies, right? For me, and the other thing too is like, I work with a lot of founders. I will work with founders that are 60 years old. I'll work with founders that are 16 years old, right? You got to kind of create content where they are. That's why like I create a ton of this content on TikTok and I would have never have guessed, but that's kind of blowing up, right? And I also have a lot that's on LinkedIn and some founders are just on Twitter or X. So it's like, this agnostic video content strategy, I think is a great way to just, expand your reach and to help, get your information out there.
It's worked for us as well. Obviously, creating a brand for a small VC fund like us has worked with this podcast and our fellowship program. But I want to get your thoughts on something, right? So in the consumer space, we all notice how people are being influenced by, user-generated content when they're purchasing anything online, right? You see some woman shopping at Costco and like, look at these new deals. And then my wife's got 40 things coming to the door. So we all know what that's like. But going into the B2B SaaS world, founders have this allergic reaction to creating that style of content for their product because maybe SaaS is not like that or enterprises don't buy like that. But I would love to get your thoughts on how user-generated content or customer advocacy and influencer creation is happening now at the enterprise level and how the old way of selling enterprise contracts are changing with user-generated content as its sort of thought leadership core. What are you seeing there, and how do you think founders should embrace this?
Yeah, in my experience, anything that happens on B2C side will absolutely come to the B2B side. It may be 5 years later or 10 years later, but it absolutely will happen. I remember, I'll tell you a funny story. Like when I was at Zendesk, a big thing for me was like, hey, I love when I would go to a website and I'm buying something, and even if it was their own product, they would still show all the reviews for it, right? Here's how many stars it is. And, you see it on Amazon, but you'd also go to this place. And I'm like, hey, we should just put our own user reviews there. Let people score a product, show the reviews. It's great social validation. And I remember at the time, I was like, oh, I don't know, right? Like B2B companies don't do that. Like, can we do that? We can't, And I think there's, again, just there's this inertia of like, well, we haven't done it. But you're right. You're absolutely right. Like social validation points, you're seeing it everywhere in consumer. And it makes sense, right? Like people trust their friends and colleagues a lot more than they do this company they don't even know that's saying they're amazing and buy us and give us, 7-8 figure deals. So it's absolutely happening. People are doing more research before they reach your company as well. So influencers are having more influence, right? It just is what it is. They're trusting these people. They're seeing them all the time, right? On their social, on their video. They're building these relationships and they trust them more. And you even see anecdotally, like, the shift away from like the analysts, from like the Gartners to more of like these user reviews, like G2 Crowd or Trust Radius, right? Like that's a big shift that's been happening as well. So yeah, I think it's a great way to lean into it. It's going to make even if you're selling into enterprise, it's going to make these deals go a lot faster. You're going to differentiate and you're going to build a long-term brand connection as well.
I absolutely agree. Thank you for sharing that advice. You've obviously had an incredible career in a lot of high pressure roles as a CMO, a CRO, and stuff like that. How did you manage your sort of work-life balance, even if you had any during those times? And what advice would you give for some, high pressure executives growing up now through a pre-IPO crisis or just a growth explosion of their companies to manage that balance?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, ironically, some of the more popular videos I put on the SaaS CMO Pro just talk about marketing career stuff and just how it's really hard. The hard thing with marketing is, it's fun. It's like gets you a brand and campaigns and buying and all this stuff. But the really hard thing, Matt, is that everyone thinks they're a marketing expert, right? Because we all deal with marketing in our daily lives, right? We all see ads, we all see pricing, we all buy stuff. So there's very strong opinions from the board to C-suite, the CFO, the head of sales. Everyone's kind of a marketing expert, which is a difficult dynamic to manage, right? I just tell, founders that, just recognize that walking in, it's going to take your stress level way down. I always say, like, build relationships with all those stakeholders. Really ask them ahead of time. When you join a company, ask the board, each one, ask yourself, right? Hey, what's your view on marketing, right? What do you think we should be doing? What do you think we should not be doing? Just so you know. And then just try to understand that, hey, it's a complex, as a leader, you need to spend more time building the relationships with all these stakeholders, right? And I think when you can do that and you can develop those relationships, you can educate and nurture, you almost have to run an internal marketing campaign. That will give you a little bit more breathing time to try to have some, work-life balance, but it's difficult, right? I mean, when you're on the precipice of some of these like really leading edge companies, whether that's SaaS, cloud, AI, it is what it is. It's really hard. I've been really fortunate for me. Like I just always love business. So when I'm working, it's exciting. I mean, I love this call. These are super fascinating topics, right? Like I nerd out on this stuff, but, try to choose a field that you are interested in, or try to choose a sector or an industry or even the product. Like I remember when I was choosing Slack and there were about 4 or 5 other companies I was looking at. But I love Slack. I love this idea of team communication and kind of transforming what that looked like. And so I think if you love the product, if you love your job, that's going to make it a lot easier to kind of manage the stress that naturally comes with it.
Yeah, you definitely got to love the product if you're going to be the one selling it and putting your own face behind it. I got to be honest with you, Bill, marketing feels like the hardest freaking job in the world because when things are going well, you're fighting for attribution. And when things are going poorly, you're the first on the chopping block or your budget's the first to be cut.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think I did a video just on the craziness that is tagging wars, right?
Right.
This weird effect of enterprise companies where you're just trying to tag every deal to get some pipeline credit from it, right? And I saw that and I'm like, oh my God, what a mess. But yeah, it's crazy.
Marketing attribution is never going to end well. I can always say that for sure. I got to ask you, Bill, if there was a time to go back into the CMO role, if a founder called you of a company today, who would it be and what company would it be? Is a company you've never worked for yet, but you're super passionate, excited about, but you haven't gotten the call yet from the CEO. Could you tell us that one?
Yeah, I have gotten some calls, and I've actually been very tempted for some of the foundational LLMs out there on the AI side.
I'm sure, yeah. There must be some pretty explosive LLMs that are interested in getting your knowledge in their head.
Yeah, I can't go into the specifics there, but I just think like right now AI is changing everything, and it's an incredible opportunity. And I just think like for me, that's really fun, right? When you come in with a company that's growing exponentially and you're thinking about how you build the brand, the pricing and packaging, the sales enablement, how do you build a more modern go-to-market, and also like building teams. I think that's super fun. It's one thing I do miss, right? Like I've been doing a lot more of the board and advisor stuff, but you're not working really as closely embedded with these teams before. So yeah, there's pros and cons and everything, but I think if there was one, that would be one that I would definitely be interested in.
So if we see you as a CMO of OpenAI, Anthropic, or Glean, or maybe XAI with Elon Musk, we shouldn't be that shocked because it's already in the works. All right.
Who knows?
Well, who knows? Before we wrap things up, we always ask our guests for their fast favorite. So first off, your favorite podcast.
Yeah, well, of course, Tink Talks with Matt Cohen.
Right,
but
come on.
I mean, outside of that, the Artificial Intelligence Show with Paul Reitzer, I think that's great. They do a weekly show recap of all the AI changes, updates. I think that's been phenomenal. I've learned a ton there.
Oh, we got to get you on that show. That would be awesome. Favorite newsletter or blog?
Well, of course, I have to plug the SaaS CMO Pro newsletter, which links to all the videos. But let's see here. I really love Only CFO newsletter. I think that's always fun. For me, like I love marketing, but I also want to learn the finance side, the sales side of it. And I think that's a great newsletter. It just breaks down all those topics really well.
Oh, interesting. So you go like it's the anti-CMO newsletter with a CFO one.
And a lot of times they want to work together. Look, I remember when I was at Zendesk, our CFO, Elon, he was amazing. He came to me, he's like, hey, how do we work together so we can generate more revenue in a predictable way, right? And so I think like the CFO and CMO could be a really good partnership if you nurture it, if you build it.
Oh, we believe in that. We had a company called Plana that sold to Planful, which is an FP&A platform for marketing professionals.
Oh, nice. All right, there you go.
We totally believe in that idea. I always wondered why the CFO and the CMO were at odds with each other, but they should be working closer together.
Yeah, it's like a good thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
Next is your favorite tech gadget.
So I am a huge gardener. I really nerd out on that as well. And gardening is kind of like a dated space. Like there's not a lot of innovation, but there is a company called Ratio, and they do basic cloud-based irrigation. So when it rains, your irrigation doesn't run. They do just the right amount. They have a lot of soil moisture meters and all this cool tech. So yeah, if you're into gardening or you just don't want to spend the time watering, Ratio is a really cool tool for your irrigation.
That's awesome. Well, my previous co-founder and very close friend, Devin Wright, started a company like that called Lumo, Lumo, but it's for the agriculture industry. It's basically like a Nest thermostat for the irrigation system so that wineries and vineyards can actually not have to manually turn off and on their irrigation system. So very cool. You have one of those for your house. What are you growing? What's your garden got?
Oh my God. I've got edibles, ornamentals. We got apples, avocado, strawberries, blueberries, bunch of palm tree. I just love this stuff. It's
So is it harvest season right now?
It is. We're eating a ton of apples right now, and we're still getting strawberries out. So yeah, it's good. I'm in kind of Bay Area, so we've got a nice Mediterranean climate for year-round growing.
Oh, fantastic. Next is your favorite new trend?
I'd have to say AI everywhere. Also, as we talked about mobile video, I think that's a huge trend as well. But yeah, AI trumps everything right now.
Nice. Next is your favorite book?
Oh, book. I like Earn It by Steve Pratt. So I worked with Steve when we were doing our podcast for Slack, and he's phenomenal. So he just did a new book, Earn It. It's all about earned media strategy. Definitely recommend it.
Are you going to have a book, Bill?
I'm going to have videos. I was like, do I write a book or do I do a bunch of videos? So if you want to hear Bill, watch the video.
No, here's what you do. You take all of Bill's videos, right? You put them into Claude, and you turn them into a book.
I'll have it in my unique tone and voice. Yes, there you go.
And last but not least is your favorite life lesson.
Favorite life lesson is probably best piece of career advice that I got. One of the first jobs I worked at, and the gentleman told me, he's like, Bill, don't focus on if you're employed, focus on if you're employable. And I just always took that with me. And it's like, just always be learning new skill sets, always be learning new trends and how you can deploy and just get better every day.
Such a great mindset. Thanks for joining us in the tank today with Bill Macaitis, the SaaS CMO Pro.
Thanks so much, Matt, for having me.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tank Talks. We hope you found today's conversation as insightful as we did. If you're enjoying the show, we've got 3 quick things to ask of you. First, hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or YouTube. Next, follow us and stay up to date on upcoming episodes and behind-the-scenes content on social media with Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And lastly, share the love. If you found value in today's episode, share with a friend or colleague who'd benefit too. Your support helps us bring in more amazing guests and keeps the Tank Talks engine running. That's it for today. Until next time, keep disrupting and innovating.